Attention! Europe is on the brink. The European Commission is sounding the alarm. Russia is producing more weapons than the entire EU combined. Now, the ambitious goal is millions of drones to deter the Kremlin. A fateful vote on the new sanctions package. Will it be possible to pressure Hungary and strike a blow to Putin's oil dollars? There's a technological breakthrough at the front. The Ukrainian armed forces have already received the Ukrainian killer robot from which there is no escape. This isn't science fiction, it's already a weapon on the front lines. And near Kupyansk there are hellish assaults. The occupiers are throwing in everything they've got. The battles on the banks of the Oskil are among the fiercest in recent times. Russia is sending migrant workers from Asia to war. Thousands of foreigners end up on the front lines, forced to fight under threat of deportation. And that's not all. In September, Russia plans up to 700 drone launches per day. Is Ukraine ready for a new hell from the sky? All the figures, investigations and forecasts watching this episode of Hellpoint. Shocking statements from the European Commission. Europe must produce millions of drones to defend against Russia, because Russia is manufacturing more weapons than all EU countries combined. See what Europe is already preparing for in this report.
The EU summit in Brussels has concluded, with Ukraine becoming one of the main topics. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stated, "Ukraine has done its part to begin negotiations on joining the EU. Now it's Europe's turn."
Under constant fire, Ukraine is carrying out reform after reform. That is why the Commission supports opening the first block of negotiations. Ukraine has fulfilled its obligations. Now it's our turn to do the same.
The European Commission supports the start of negotiations, but progress is being blocked by Hungary, which is against opening the first negotiation cluster. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán previously stated that Ukraine's integration could drag the EU into direct conflict with Russia. Despite this, the EU is demonstrating strong support for Ukraine. In 2025, the European Union will allocate more than 30 billion euros in financial and military aid to Kyiv. 1 billion euros have already been allocated for the development of Ukraine's defense industry, funded by profits from frozen Russian assets. Von der Leyen also emphasized that the EU is ready to provide Ukraine in advance with the remaining 11 billion euros from the G7 loan package, as well as deliver 2 million artillery shells by the end of 2025. The EU is also increasing political pressure on Russia. A new 18th package of sanctions against the Russian Federation is already being prepared, although its adoption is being held up by Slovakia, which has not yet given its consent. At the same time, EU leaders have agreed to extend the current sanctions against Russia for another 6 months. Meanwhile, European Commissioner for Defense and Space Andrius Kubilius has called on Europe to urgently ramp up its own arms production.
Russians are now able to produce more ammunition in 3 months than all NATO member states can in a year.
Kubilius emphasized that Europe must prepare for a possible Russian aggression against NATO countries within the next 5 years. He proposed creating an army of millions of drones, stressing that Ukraine already has unique experience in using them.
There are only 2 armies on the European continent with combat experience involving millions of drones: the Russian army, which is planning new acts of aggression, and the Ukrainian army, which is resisting it.
That is why European countries are seeking cooperation with Kyiv. Denmark was the first to launch a joint defense enterprise with Ukraine, and the Netherlands will finance the production of 600,000 Ukrainian drones. Canada is now also considering the possibility of joint weapons production. Ottawa is considering models of cooperation that Ukraine has already successfully implemented with European partners, particularly with Denmark and France, says Canadian Defense Minister David McGuinty.
Ukrainians have achieved tremendous success in drone technology. We are actively studying this. It is quite possible that Canadian companies will gain some interesting industrial advantages.
At the same time, there are concerns in Brussels that the White House has recommended the State Department stop funding investigations into war crimes. This concerns nearly 20 international programs. Initiatives operating in Myanmar, Syria, Iraq, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Gambia, as well as in Ukraine, may be subject to cuts. Although the decision is not yet final, the US State Department has the right to appeal, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio is considering supporting key programs related to Ukraine.
Sanctions pressure is increasing. Slovakia has supported the 18th package but is demanding preferences. This round could hit the Kremlin's petrodollars hard. Prices are falling and the State Duma has already revised the budget twice. Europe is preparing for a vote on the 27th of June. Will the EU be able to pressure Hungary and reach a compromise? All the details are in this report.
Hungary and Slovakia refused to approve the new 18th package of European Union sanctions against Russia after the meeting of EU foreign ministers in Brussels. Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó stated that the EU's goal is to adopt new, tougher sanctions than ever before and to provide Ukrainians with more weapons and money. But Hungary and Slovakia are against these. We made it clear that we will not allow Hungarians to send money to Ukraine. We are not prepared to contribute to any new financial support, any new arms supplies, any new military operations. Péter Szijjártó, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Hungary. The 18th package of sanctions includes restrictions against more than 30 individuals and legal entities, 2 Chinese banks, the disconnection of 22 Russian banks from SWIFT, as well as the addition of 77 tankers from Russia's shadow fleet to the blacklists. In addition, the European Commission proposes to lower the price cap on Russian oil from $60 to $45 per barrel. However, Hungary and Slovakia are not ready for this, since refusing to purchase cheap hydrocarbons from Russia would immediately impact the utility bills of ordinary citizens.
The Prime Minister of Hungary had previously suggested lifting the existing sanctions against Russia altogether, citing the escalation in the Middle East and the potential spike in oil prices. And supposedly, in order to prevent Europe from suffering, sanctions against Russia should be lifted. Let Russia continue to supply Europe with cheap oil and gas.
After the meeting of the EU foreign ministers in Brussels, some diplomats off the record stated that they also do not agree with lowering the price cap.
Some delegations are more candid, wanting to remove the reduction of the price cap on Russian oil, taking into account the current state of the international oil market, while others want to keep it. However, we are very close to an agreement. EU diplomat.
Most likely, as was the case last year, representatives of Hungary and Slovakia want to squeeze everything they can out of the current situation and secure some concessions for themselves.
Most likely, it could end with Hungary and Slovakia eventually voting in favor of the sanctions package. But at the same time, of course, as always, they will be bargaining for some preferences from Brussels, some subsidies, and possibly some exemptions from the additional sanctions that will be imposed against Russia.
This year, the Russian State Duma has already revised the budget twice, which was based on a price of $70 per barrel, and a price of $45 should simply collapse the Kremlin's economy. In other words, the 18th package could actually bring Putin to the negotiating table.
After the 17th package of sanctions was introduced, Russia reduced its energy sales on the European market by a third, literally, within the first week of this 17th package being in effect. So we can imagine the speed at which these sanctions work if the 18th package is at least as strong as it's being announced. This effect could come even sooner, especially when it comes to lowering the purchase price of Russian oil, reducing the maximum price from $60 to $45.
The European Council vote on the 18th package is scheduled for the 27th of June, so EU representatives still have time to find a compromise or put pressure on Hungary and Slovakia.
Urgent. A unique Ukrainian robot is already in service with the armed forces. A deadly Ukrainian development is entering the battlefield. There is no escape from it. Meanwhile, real hell is brewing near Kupyansk. The occupiers are throwing everything into frenzied assaults, and on the banks of the Oskil, battles rage that make your blood run cold. The truth from the front lines, numbers and footage, watch it right now. The Ukrainian army has received a new combat assistant. The unmanned ground complex Protector has been officially introduced into the military. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine has completed the codification and granted permission for the operation of the new heavy unmanned ground complex Protector, developed by a domestic manufacturer. This autonomous combat vehicle was created specifically for the conditions of modern warfare, taking into account the real experience gained by Ukrainian soldiers on the front lines. The Protector is designed to carry out missions in the most challenging conditions, from mined forest belts to swampy or snow-covered sections of the front. Thanks to its all-wheel drive, powerful internal combustion engine, and high off-road capability, it can overcome ditches, cobblestone roads, rough terrain, and even water crossings. Run-flat tires ensure mobility even in case of damage, which is critically important in combat conditions. The platform can carry up to 700 kilograms of cargo. This includes ammunition, equipment, water, medical supplies, or even the evacuation of the wounded. Thanks to a range of up to 400 kilometers without recharging or refueling, the Protector can operate effectively at significant distances from the base, maintaining operational logistics in combat conditions. In addition to transportation, the drone can be easily modified for other tasks. Its design allows for the integration of robotic combat modules, electronic warfare systems, electronic intelligence systems, as well as communication or surveillance equipment. Such versatility opens up new possibilities for use on the front lines, especially in unstable environments or situations with a high threat to personnel. The Ministry of Defense emphasizes this is not just another technical novelty, but a new stage in the development of combat robotic systems. We are talking about a full-sized unmanned vehicle created specifically for the front line. It allows dangerous missions to be carried out without risking the lives of Ukrainian soldiers, bringing the idea of autonomous combat closer to reality. In the context of full-scale war, where the front is constantly shifting and logistics are often complicated by shelling and enemy attacks, such robotic systems could become a real breakthrough. They not only relieve people of burdens, but also pave the way for a new paradigm of warfare, where dangerous tasks are replaced by technology. The ministry also addresses domestic arms and military equipment manufacturers with a reminder. All the necessary information regarding the procedure for codifying new models can be found on the official website of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. This is an important step to ensure that innovative developments are adopted more quickly and begin working towards Ukraine's victory. Meanwhile, the pilots of the Phoenix Unmanned Aviation Unit continue to impress with their accuracy and effectiveness. This time, in the Kharkiv direction, they inflicted serious losses on Russian forces by destroying several pieces of heavy equipment at once. It is specified that during the combat operation, an armored personnel carrier, a battle tank, a mortar crew, a self-propelled artillery unit Gvozdika, and several enemy trucks were hit. Overall, the unit reported that the attacks were carried out from the air using strike drones, which quickly detect targets and hit them with minimal response time. Such effectiveness is the result of continuous improvement of tactics and the coordinated work of the crews. According to experts, the systematic work of Phoenixes significantly weakens the enemy's logistics and combat capabilities in the region. The destruction of armored vehicles and artillery demonstrates the growing role of strike UAVs in modern warfare, especially in dynamic and critical sectors of the front. And the situation in the Kharkiv region is as follows. There are no crossings, but the plans remain unchanged. The occupiers are not giving up attempts to encircle Kupyansk. The situation in the north of the Kharkiv region is tense. The defense forces are repelling enemy assault actions in the area of Kupyansk and surrounding settlements. In addition, there are constant battles on the banks of the Oskil near Kupyansk. According to experts, the Russians are not stopping their assault actions on the banks of the Oskil. The main efforts are concentrated in the areas of the settlements of Dvorichna, Kamyanka, Krasne Pershe and Fikhulivka. Yesterday, assault actions took place near Kindrashivka, which is north of Kupyansk. On the western bank of the Oskil, the occupiers are doing everything they can to prepare conditions for encircling or storming the city. It's important to understand that for these plans to be carried out, they need to establish logistics on the western bank, meaning they have to set up crossings. Recently there was another such attempt, but like the previous one, it ended in failure. At the moment, the Russians have no crossings over the Oskil. But it should be understood that their plans regarding Kupyansk have not gone anywhere. Experts note the enemy needs crossings. Only in this way will they be able to move their armored vehicles across the river. For example, they transport ATVs and motorcycles on boats or rafts, which they pull from one bank to the other with ropes. The occupiers are drawn to Kupyansk. Despite the lack of crossings, attempts at encirclement continue and the situation in the north of Kharkiv region remains extremely tense. Active combat operations are ongoing in the area of Kupyansk and the surrounding villages. Russian forces are trying to break through the Ukrainian military's defenses, but without success. It is especially intense on the banks of the Oskil River near Kupyansk, where the enemy continues to attempt to create conditions for further encirclement of the city. According to the defense forces, the main enemy efforts are concentrated in the directions of Dvorichna, Kamyanka, Krasne Pershe and Fikhulivka. Assault actions have also been recorded near Kindrashivka, already on the western bank of the Oskil. This indicates that the occupiers are trying at any cost to gain a foothold on the other side of the river. However, the Russians are critically lacking logistics to carry out their plans. They still do not have any crossings over the Oskil. The latest attempts to set a pontoon or temporary structures have ended in failure. Despite this, their intentions have not changed. The enemy continues to look for ways to transfer equipment to the western bank. Although there are no full-fledged crossings, they are actively using makeshift methods. Motor vehicles, quad bikes, motorcycles and other equipment are transported on boats or homemade rafts, which are pulled across the river with ropes. This allows them to maintain a limited foothold near Kupyansk, especially in the narrow and shallow sections of the river. Ukrainian forces are holding the defense and delivering fire strikes against enemy attempts to cross the river. But headquarters emphasize that Russia has not abandoned its plan to take Kupyansk. Despite all the difficulties, the occupiers continue to prepare new assaults. That's all for today. Tune in for the next news update tomorrow. Russia is sending guests from Central Asia to war. Thousands of citizens from Central and South Asian countries who came to Russia for work now find themselves on the front lines. They are forced to fight against Ukraine under threat of deportation or imprisonment. Who are these people? Why do they agree? And how does the Kremlin turn migrant workers into cannon fodder? All the details are in this report. You will be shocked.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Russia will ultimately be free.
Russia has intensified the mobilization of labor migrants. Raids are being conducted across all Russian regions. They go door to door, checking documents. If there is no record of military registration, men are taken to military enlistment offices.
Let's see your documents.
A harsh raid took place in Moscow with the participation of Oman. And the authorities of Uzbekistan have stated that such incidents contradict the spirit of friendship between the countries. What kind of friendship can there be if even Bastrikin does not hide the fact that the investigative committee is rounding up migrants who have received Russian passports to send them to war in Ukraine?
Our military investigative department, under my authority, is conducting regular raids in places where migrants are located. Together with the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the Russian National Guard. For what purpose? We are tracking down citizens of the Russian Federation who have obtained foreign citizenship but have not registered for military service, even though they are required to do so. We have already caught 80,000 of these Russian citizens who not only don't want to go to the front lines, they don't even want to go to the military enlistment office because, like this hero, they could already be sent to the front. But this one went for the sake of citizenship, while they did not. So we've caught 80,000, registered them for military service, and already 20,000 young Russian citizens who for some reason don't like living in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, they are now on the front lines.
In reality, they mostly go to Russia to earn money.
A robot painted to look like a resident is much better than a living Chekhovian migrant. It doesn't rape anyone, it doesn't kill anyone. There are no problems with it at all. Let's get a robot.
Russians don't want to work, and robots for Russia are something distant and unattainable. That's why Z channels publish videos of law enforcement raids at construction sites.
In order to obtain citizenship of the Russian Federation, you can sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. The contract duration ranges from 1 to 5 years. After the contract ends, you are given a Russian passport.
The goal is still the same: to hand out draft notices. Markets and construction sites are no longer the only places involved. Security forces have started using drones to locate migrants. Mobilized migrants at war are formed into separate units which are needed at the most dangerous sections of the front. By the end of 2025, Moscow intends to add another 300 to 400,000 people to the occupation forces.
Russia and our intelligence constantly reports, and this week as well there was a report from the head of the main intelligence directorate. Russia is building up the armed forces involved in the war against Ukraine. If 6 months ago there were 570,000 servicemen, now it is 615,000. And by the end of 2025, Russia intends to mobilize another 300 to 400,000.
Citizens from Central Asia who come to Russia for work are being forcibly sent to fight against Ukraine. This is also confirmed by the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine.
Migrant workers as cannon fodder. Russia is forcibly recruiting citizens of Central Asia to fight against Ukraine. Representatives of the Russian army deceive foreigners with promises of quick earnings through short-term contracts.
Who is willing to die for Russian citizenship? After all, according to intelligence reports, most of these volunteers die in the war.
Many of these people have Russian passports in addition to the passports of their own countries. For example, out of 21 people from Kazakhstan, only 6 are exclusively citizens of Kazakhstan. The rest have Russian passports.
Among the recently eliminated mercenaries who were citizens of Uzbekistan and Tajikistan are Umarov and Kulbuvazoda, both men born in 1984. Migrants from Tajikistan and Uzbekistan are not allowed to submit documents for a passport until they sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense to participate in Putin's so-called special military operation. And the chances of surviving the war against Ukraine are minimal. If they do survive, they face criminal prosecution in their home countries for participating in the armed forces of a foreign state. Putin and his Ministry of Defense couldn't care less about the quality of the army. Migrants, debtors, the unemployed, and criminals, as long as they can send more people into minefields for the sake of imperial ambitions.
Meanwhile, Russia is preparing a drone barrage of up to 700 launches per day. Is Ukraine really facing hell from the sky this September? What are Russia's UAV production capacities, and what should we prepare for? Analysis of numbers and forecasts.
The Russians are ramping up drone attacks. The occupiers are now launching hundreds of Shaheeds over Ukrainian territory. And it seems this isn't the limit. Now, Ukrainians are even being advised to be ready for such attacks every day. Supposedly, starting in September, the aggressor country could launch 700 Shaheeds at Ukraine every day. But is this really the case?
If we talk specifically about Shaheeds, I think this number is greatly exaggerated. By the end of 2024, the Russians were able to produce about 70 drones per day. And if you look at the statistics of drone usage up to and including May 2025, as the president said, 11,200, divide that by the number of days and you get 73 drones. This generally matches the statistics provided by our general staff and all other observations.
Recently, the Russians have indeed increased their drone production capacity, but we're not talking about hundreds per day. Currently, the occupiers can roll out 90 Shaheeds per day from the assembly line. At the same time, Russia plans to build another plant for UAV production.
In order to significantly increase drone production several times over, say, to 700 drones per day, or 500, or even 300, that's a task the Russians are currently not capable of accomplishing. Even if 25,000 South Koreans come here, each bringing their own brick, and they're all already trained and prepared for drone production, I still think that in any case, this task cannot be accomplished by September. If we recall the procedure for launching the plant in Ilabuga, when the buildings were already completed, and all that was left was to train people and master the technological processes, it still took 9 months from the start of the project before the Russians were able to produce 30 drones per month. 30 drones per month, not per day, per month.
Therefore, this is a problem for the future. However, of course, we need to start preparing for this right now. Another question is, where did the figure of 500 or 700 drones per day, which Russia supposedly can produce, come from? Most likely, this referred not only to Shaheeds, but also to decoy drones.
There are Shahed drones and there are decoy drones. The production of decoys can be organized in much larger quantities. But our air defense systems have, so to speak, the signature of each target. And analyzing the signature of these targets generally allows us to distinguish a decoy from a real drone. The problem arose when these drones started being armed, especially in the frontline areas, with warheads of 1.5, 2, or even 3 kilograms. And then it's no longer just a decoy drone, it becomes a strike drone.
At the same time, we should be prepared for the fact that attacks by hundreds of Shaheeds are the new reality. It's just that the Russians will launch them not every day, but with intervals.
Another thing is that the Russians can stockpile them, as they're doing now. They can skip a few days, launch, say, 30, 40, 50 drones at night. I mean, Shaheeds, I'm talking only about Shaheeds. They can stockpile and then strike, for example, with 110 Shaheeds. This is possible now. Maybe by increasing the intervals, they will increase the number of attacks. The attacks have become more sensitive because the Russians are using the tactic of concentrating a number of shades on a specific location. They can launch 50, 70, even 80 drones at a single location.
and this in turn puts incredible strain on Ukrainian air defense systems. It's very difficult to shoot down that many drones. As a result, Ukraine is now actively seeking ways to counter such attacks. And there are already some developments.
Right now, a program for interceptor drones is being rolled out very actively, and there's a lot of talk about using light aircraft. A Cabinet of Ministers resolution has been issued on this matter, so now it turns out that the Territorial Defense Volunteer Units, the FTG, will finally be responsible. There will be a specific structure responsible for fighting against Shaheds. I believe that the most effective countermeasure is to deploy interceptor drones or small missiles on light aircraft, but I don't mean the Tucanos. I'm not talking about the same shark that's now started circulating online.
And when an effective countermeasure is found, then the attacks will become less intense. After all, the new Russian strategy will no longer work. In any case, there is also good news. For now, you shouldn't expect 700 Shaheds a day. Although undoubtedly it's better to be prepared for this in the future.
That's all for today. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like and write your comments. And catch other news in the next episode of Pekelna Toshka.